Hi, I'm Polly Galliard, and this is Photolucida's in Focus. Today, I'm speaking with the Executive Director of the Colorado Photographic Arts Center, Samantha Johnston, who's been a juror for Critical Mass for many years. Samantha and I are going to discuss how to get a juror's attention with your entry. She has a lot of good advice because she's been doing this for a while, and she's good at explaining the ins and outs of the jurying process for critical mass. Remember that registration opens May 31st. We're really looking forward to seeing your entries this year. Um, Hi, Samantha.
Hi, Polly. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for being with us today and in focus. Got some questions for you about during the competition.
Yeah,
Um, how many years have you been a juror for Critical Mass?
8 years. I looked back. So I took the position at CPAC in the fall of 2015. And so 2016 was when I started jurying for critical mass.
Wow. So you've seen a lot.
Seen a lot of different bodies of work and work in one year that doesn't, that makes it to the 200. It's been really great to see different projects,
Right.
and then to be able to see that work at different, having attended Photolucida once, but then also like at other reviews to have met with photographers where I've seen the work. So
Great, great. So can you tell us just a little bit about what makes the critical mass during process unique in your experience?
yeah, so for me, I like that that the system that you use puts it into kind of a color wheel. And so it's then broken up. And then randomly, I believe for all juror, like
Right.
my yellow is not the same as someone else's yellow, which is fine. It's not that but it's more for me that it's more manageable that way, because it is a little daunting to know that you're looking at 200 bodies of work, 10 images, statements. It's a lot of imagery and reading to get through, and I like to really make sure I'm carving the time out, so the when I'm jurying, I like to look at it like, okay, if I can just get through like 3/4 of yellow, that's kind of my benchmark, versus it all just being kind of in one big portal where you're just having to kind of work through.
Right.
So I think it allows, then I can kind of go back to things, and it makes all of that a little bit more manageable than just kind of going through in some of the way the other jury platforms that we all use work. So
Yeah, it's not as daunting when it's broken up into those groups.
yeah.
Um, so, what is your opinion on how an artist should think about editing their portfolio for critical mass?
Yeah, I mean, I really think they should consider their sequence, their, how their work is being read. 10 images is not that much. And so and I also think, thinking about their statement, how the two are going together. I go back and forth. Sometimes I look at the pictures first, and then I read the statement. Sometimes I read the statement. Either way, I'm doing both, but it varies. And so yeah, I think that's, thinking about the context that everyone's looking at it on a different size screen, that you're scrolling through kind of horizontally. You can see the grid, you can see the 10, and then you can open them up to see them a little bit bigger, which is great. But yeah, I mean, I think thinking about those 10 and making sure they're really strong images. I think if the work needs a sort of installation shot, that it's important to maybe include that, so that it gives the juror a little more context. Um, I definitely have seen more, as I see and review more work and go to more reviews, there's work that I maybe know, I have that benefit of, oh, I've seen this in person, so I know the detail of it. I think you and I talked a little bit about that, having the exhibition up most recently at CPAC. For me, it was, I mean, some of those artists, I know their work, I've seen the work in person, but to have all of that, from Lou Peralta's photo sculpture to Krista slowness is weaving to, there's so many different ways that the medium is being pushed. And so if there is a way to show some sort of detail or information about that, the juror may not know or have seen that work, I think it's important to consider that. Even Diane Mayer's, the cross stitching, so much, and then also just the beauty, I mean, prints, we all know prints look great in person, so I think that's the difference too, is for the most part, it is an online thing. You're looking at that work online, there is an exhibition, but it's not like it's traveling, so I think that too, like it is an online show. So, for the most part, so.
Do you find that during critical mass is different than, say, portfolio review? Obviously, you're live and there's more work in a portfolio review, but do you think you go about it sort of in the same way?
I would say so. I mean, I feel I'm looking at it through that same lens. I think the feedback is, I know there's a space to leave feedback, but um, that's a lot for, to type all of that. And I often worry that if I type something that it may be perceived not how I intended it, because it's just, blind or not blind feedback. And with more explanation, that's always not, whereas when I think that's for me, the only difference is when I'm at the review table and I'm able to talk, or on a Zoom review and I'm able to talk to a photographer about what they're, a little bit more about the work, ask more questions. I think that's kind of the difference. So I think as much as you can, the most information, making sure the statement is well delivered. And then if there's information about the way the prints, in the material, I think that's important to include. So.
So you said something about the artist statement that sometimes you read it before and sometimes you read it after. What dictates that for you?
No, nothing in particular. I just try to change it up. Sometimes I like to look at the images and think like, oh, am I getting what the artist is trying to put across? Sometimes I think I do. And then I'm like, oh, I really want to, as I said, I read the statements, but sometimes I just change and I'm like, let me look at the pictures first and then read the statement. And then, because sometimes I read the statement and I'm like, oh, that doesn't tie as well maybe for the work as I hoped it to, and then so then there's that, oh, I looked at the statement and then I looked at the work and I'm like, oh, okay, that's a little different than what I maybe was thinking in my mind when I looked, when I started reading or looking at the pictures, vice versa. So.
So it's important for the statement then, I guess, to really match what the work is trying to do.
Yeah.
Right. So people should spend time on the statement.
Yeah. And I know that's always a challenge, we're photographers, artists, or photographer, they're making the work, it's about the work, but there also has to be explanation. I also think in the context of when we're mounting exhibitions and like how we're communicating that out, someone may see it on our website or our social media before they even walk into the space. And so, making sure, so there is an importance to that statement and to that explanation.
There's a place for the artist to write about the price of their work and whether the work is editioned when they register and enter critical mass. Is that something that you ever consider?
That's not for me as important, but I feel like that's also because I run I mean, work is for sale in our space, but it's, I think the pricing might be something that's maybe more important to a for-profit space that might be looking at representation and then, I like to see what the additions are, but the addition isn't going to affect how I'm going to if I show the work.
Right. So it might be more a gallerist that has a profitable gallery that's looking at that part of the
Yeah.
registration. Okay. So there are several different scoring mechanisms for critical mass. There's four different ways to basically score the work. And the highest one is a wow. um, what does it take for somebody to get a wow from you?
Uh, yeah, I always think a lot about, like, I really make sure I read, because I feel like there's also a little descriptor of like what wow, um,
Yes.
I don't have that in front of me, but what wow mean, what each of those mean, and I really try to take all of that to heart and really consider all of that as I'm going through and marking the work. I mean, a wow is something I'm really excited to see. It's something maybe new or a take on something I haven't seen before. Topics that are timely, that are really considering what's happening in our work, whether it's environment or social justice or even images about beauty. I mean, there's so much different work that we review, and I think that's what's so great, is to see so many different types of projects. But I would say that's what really gets a wow from me, is something that I'm like, wow, I haven't. And again, I like go back, and each time, I try to really like, okay, what is it like the wow is, if you can fill in that, what the
Well, do you find it difficult at all to, because we get a lot of different kinds of submissions. I mean, it can be anything from photo sculpture to what you were talking about, weaving or sewing, and all kinds of different things. Do you find that it's difficult to look at all those like, and then there's just, documentary, the sort of like classic documentary and classic photography. Is it hard to look at all those things together and sort of pit them against each other at all?
No, I don't find it. I mean, I love looking at photography. I love looking at pictures. I love looking at the way people make choices, the way they the the choices they're making to do the work, make the work, or make the project. And so I like the variety. I like that there's all different things. And I again, I try to take those statements that you put next to like what a wow me, and the other, and I try to think about it, because there's oftentimes things that I'm like, well, is it a wow? Because I do really like it. I mean, there's lots of good work. It's gotten to that level for a reason. And so, um, yeah, there's a part of me that has a hard time, sometimes I'm like, am I giving too many wows? Am I balancing enough? Is it, and then I'll go back and re-look and go back through the selections I've made, think about, um, go through all of that each time. So
Yeah, it does take a couple of times to go through and really live with the work and think about it before you can finalize what that score is. At least
yeah,
that's what my experience was.
yeah.
Do you happen to have any sort of pet peeve on any kind of anything that you see that is just, no, don't do that?
I don't, yeah, I looked at all these questions ahead of time, and I was trying to think of, when I'm jurying, what, I would say statements that get to the point are great. And when they're really long-winded, um, I am kind of like, maybe have an editor look at it like that. I don't know that it's a pet peeve, but it's just like,
Oh
I
yeah.
try to think about like, this is so long, again, like, and I was just at Medium in San Diego looking at reviews. So I always try to remind, like, this is what I'm thinking about, because this is the type of space I run. I run a nonprofit space. I'm thinking about my constituency. I'm thinking about community. I'm thinking about programming that we can do along with work that we exhibit. And then I'm thinking about how my community and the photo community is engaging with this work, and that I need to be able to talk about it, and I need to be able to, you know, have some sort of higher arching text that goes along with their statement potentially, or why are we showing this at our space? Why is it important? Why is it, my marketing director and I have that conversation, and my team and I talk about that. We're showing this because, and it ties into other programming we do. And so I would say there is something to be said for a well-written statement, for having somebody who has maybe edited it for you, who having someone who maybe isn't as familiar with the work to read through your statement and then look at the work. Is it all aligning, or is it too much in the text? That I would say, because it's not like you're seeing framing choices necessary, or if something isn't framed well, and again, we know framing is expensive, so I say all of these things as like, with a caveat, I guess, but I can't say
Yeah.
I have huge pet peeves that I'm like, oh my god, I can't like.
Well, the artist statement this year is limited to 250 words. So that's going to be helpful because when you are going through that many entries, I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot not only to look at, but to read. And sometimes you find yourself like getting off on their website and looking around there. So um,
Yeah, and I think it's
that's,
important. I mean,
yeah,
we all know we scroll, we look, we consume imagery, and we're not always looking at tons and tons of text, so how are you capturing someone about your work in a well thought together statement? Because often, people will walk in the gallery. They will maybe look at the wall text. We want them to engage, we invite them to engage. We ask people when they come in if they have questions. But again, those are things I want artists to think about, because that's the reality of the space engage, like, I mean, not everybody wants to ask the question they have. So, but that wall text is sometimes the only chance I'm getting for someone to hear more about the project.
right, right. So, do you have any advice to give somebody maybe entering critical mass for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, again, I talked a little bit at the start. I think thinking about your sequence, thinking about that like really tight edit of 10 images, obviously someone's probably working from a larger body of work. Again, working with, if you have a group of artists that you can, lean on, photographers who can help you, get on a Zoom or get, do in person, like really looking at that edit. I mean, I applied to critical mass when I used to make pictures before I became executive
Do
director.
me
And I
too.
remember doing an exercise and working a lot to think about my edit and how I would, and not just the edit itself, but then the order of the 10, and the order in which someone would be seeing them. I think all of that is important. And I think, it also is an investment if you don't feel that you're ready yet, or maybe the work isn't quite ready, then maybe wait, because it's an it's a commitment of money. And but I think it is, you are having a lot of people look at your work. I mean, I definitely can remember work that I have seen in critical mass, and there are photographers that I meet with at reviews, and I'll say, critical mass 2 years ago, 1 year ago, I've seen this. Did I see it in And they're like, what? Are you kidding? And I'm like, yes, I see it. I would keep it in my crazy brain Rolodex. And so, um, and even when they don't make it to, I take my own notes in that top 200, I make my own screenshots of work that I'm interested in as well, knowing that maybe some of the ones I thought were wows maybe don't make it to be a wow.
Right. I think that that's an important thing about critical mass also is you don't have to make the top 50 to get exhibitions or to get awards or anything like that. It's the top 200. The same thing has happened with other galleries and so forth.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's important, I think that people know that.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I don't know how I remember it, but I do, and I'll be like, oh yes, now I'm really excited to see this in person because I had more questions about things that, I
Right.
wasn't going to just put a random I know I could email them if I really wanted to ask it, but then here I am meeting with them again and seeing the work. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'll use Martha Ketterer was an example. She comes to mind. Like she was in 2 years ago, Critical Mass, and then she was in a 4-person group show at CPAC last year. And then I had met, so she was in Critical Mass, and then I remember seeing the work, and then I met her at PhotoFest, and we kept the conversation moving. So it wasn't right away because that's a thing too. It just takes time, um the pandemic slowed us. I wasn't planning out, as I don't plan 5 years out. I plan about a year and a half out. I just moved into a new space last July, so I don't have, I'm not fully planned out. I'm still making adjust, and pulling exhibitions together. And I don't like to be planned out much more than a year and a half to 2 years, so that changes can be made, or I see something and I want to make that shift. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to explain it, I guess. Um, well, we really appreciate the fact that you hosted the Top 50 exhibition for Critical Mass 2023. Thank you for doing that. I know it
Yeah.
was so much work.
It was great though. And it was great to have the public be able to see so much different work, and some people who maybe weren't as involved with the photo community but were coming in and seeing the exhibition, and to just learn more about what critical mass is, and how all that work was selected and put into the space. So it was great.
Well, Samantha, thank you for your time today. I think
Yeah.
this is a super helpful advice for people to think about when they're entering the competition, which opens May 31st. And thank you again for being a juror again
Yeah.
this year.
Happy to be.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it so much.
No problem.
Okay.